What's up, marketing maniacs, and welcome back to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand, your ultimate BFF in the wide world of digital marketing. Join me, your host, Nicholas Kuhne, spilling the beans on the juiciest trends and hottest tips to up your marketing game. Howdy everyone, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with your host Nicholas Kuhne. Today we have Alex Sanfilippo, who is the founder of Podmatch.com, and he is the guy who actually got me started into podcasting. So I've got to give a lot of thanks to Alex for that. So for those of you who don't know, Podmatch is a software that automatically matches podcast guests and hosts for interviews. Alex is also the host of a top-rated podcast, Podcasting Made Simple. We will put the link in the description, and is a lead educator in the podcasting industry. Alex's sole focus is to serve independent podcast guests and hosts so they can grow their influence and revenue so they can better serve their listeners. So in that description, I can honestly say that it is 100% true because it is for independent podcasters. And you don't just give a platform and say, give me your money. You give steps, you have training, and I can see you're an educator as well. You've got tons of videos, and there's a bit of gamification in it as well. I see now on some of the profiles, and mine soon will have Podcast Pro, done X amount of podcasts, and you are motivating people to grow their podcasts. So, Alex, I'm a great fan, and I'm super happy to have you on the show today.
Nicholas, thank you so much for the kind words. And really, I said this before we started, and I didn't want to necessarily make it sound like I was blowing smoke, but I'm going to say it again because it really is the truth. I may have helped you get started, but you have done such a good job. I always listen to shows before I jump on them as a guest, and I can't always say this, but the reality is you have a really good show that truly is binge-worthy. Like, I can listen to your show just on repeat. I could start episode 1 and go through, and I think I'd enjoy every step of it. So great job. You did the work. I'm honored to have played even a small part and super happy to be here today.
Well, it's a growth process. I can remember from the first time I started that podcast, and you learn and you grow. And luckily with Podmatch, as you grow, you also have communities you can join in order to sort of get best practice from the rest of the other folks who are growing at the same time, and obviously from Alex himself. But this is not a Podmatch discussion. This is a discussion about Alex. And why I wanted to chat to you is because I've looked at the growth of Podmatch, and I'm trying to think, how have you managed as a business to grow organically? Because we had this discussion before. So we were talking about trust fund babies, and I can't remember if you managed to start this with the millions from your dad.
No, I didn't. I haven't used that yet because I haven't seen that yet. Funny enough, my dad has actually done really well. He's an entrepreneur himself. He's done really well. Going back to my childhood, though, I realized once I became an adult that there was many things that most parents provide their kids that me and my brothers, had to go get jobs to figure out how to pay for. Things like school, car insurance, all those things. Like when you're growing up in the United States, at least, that was kind of common. I didn't know that till I got out of that. I was like, yo, Dad, like we're close. I was like, what the heck, man? And he goes, man, I just want you all to learn to be independent and figure this stuff out on your own. And to this day, I still respect that. So not a trust fund baby. No outside dollars. As a matter of fact, there was also a very minimum investment. When we started Podmatch, the partners, there's 3 of us, we put a total of $5,000 into an account. And we said we would use this until it's gone, and then we'll reevaluate. We never reevaluated. We never ran out of that $5,000. And I'm super thankful for that. And I don't want it to sound like we made $1 million overnight or anything like that, but we were just very smart and frugal at first, and then just watched that money grow and went from 5,000 to 6 to 7, right? Like it was a very slow growth, just like what happens when you grow organically. But we've been profitable since we launched, which I'm super thankful for.
That's fantastic. Now, this is a crowded space. I think in the last since the pandemic, actually, I think the podcast industry has just exploded, and there's been a ton of consolidation. There's been a lot of companies that have come and gone. How have you grown your business? I mean, let's maybe start. I mean, how did you go from 10 subscribers, and I asked this to another guest before, from taking from 1,000 subscribers to 50,000?
Yeah. First off, we never started with 10. We started with 100. And the reason for that is pre-launch. I've been in the podcasting space, and from the introduction you gave, I think anyone can tell, like, podcasting is literally all I do. And so for me, being in the space for a long time, I started speaking on stages and building out reputation with people, started building out those connections, that community. That's super important to me personally. And when we were launching Podmatch, I started talking to hosts to see if they were interested. I started talking to guests, and I always collected their contact information, just telling them, if I ever do something with this, can I just personally email you and you can just tell me what you think? So the day we launched, we had over 100 people on it. And that very first day, that's how many people signed up. And then a couple weeks later, it ended up being into the thousands. So it happened really quick, but it's because I leveraged my reputation in the industry, which wasn't like a big, I'm not like famous or anything like that, right? But I was building those one-on-one connections with people. And after a couple of years, you meet a few hundred people that would actually give you a shot just to help you out. And that was sort of how we launched. And then going from 1,000 to I don't even know the number. We went from like 1,000 to like 10,000 really fast. The reality is this had very little to do with me, very little to do with me. And the reason I say that is the timing was just perfect for this sort of thing. And I want to be sensitive because we did launch summer of 2020, which was a hard time for the world. The thing is, a lot of very big name professional speakers just were told by their team that, hey, your entire tour of speaking on stage is canceled until further notice. Not even, we're kicking it back a little bit, it's canceled until further notice. And so all these public speakers that are used to having a platform, they're used to speaking for the first time ever, decided, you know what are some alternatives? I've always said no to podcasting, and that's the reality. They had always said no to podcasting. Now they were saying, okay, I'll try this. And when we launched, the day we launched, I just posted something on LinkedIn. I didn't even post it anywhere else, just LinkedIn. Had no following. I was an aerospace guy at that point, a corporate guy. But I was like, I'm just going to say what we did. And a few really big name public speakers saw it and reshared it. And next thing I know, that brought, just in a matter of a week, over 60,000 people to Podmatch. Just in that one post. I didn't boost it or anything like that, but these people were joining that are used to charging $100,000 for an hour presentation. They're now saying, hey, does anyone want me on their show, please? And that just caused this thing to take off and accelerate literally overnight. It was right place, right time. Yes, it's a good idea, so I'm not trying to sell myself short, but the reality is, if I posted that now, people wouldn't necessarily respond the same way as they did then. So I want to be sensitive to the fact that timing in entrepreneurship and business and startups is extremely important. At the very least, we can see the season, but the hour, the day that you post and you start getting it out there is kind of up to chance in many ways.
I love that honesty, because a lot of people will write books on how to be successful, etc., and they say, and it's wake up at 4 o'clock, do 10 push-ups, meet 500 people. But at the end of the day, it's a balance of timing, good luck, having the right product at the right time, and having a good product. And a lot of people are missing 2 or 3 of those elements. So no matter how many books you read, I've had a very successful business and then a very not successful business, and part of it was based on timing, and part of it was based on bad management. So the two the two do go together. Now I want to talk about your process of marketing Podmatch now, because you've mentioned that you've focused mainly on organic. Does this mean you don't pay anything on paid ads, or that the focus is on organic?
The focus is on organic, and at time of recording this, we're currently running our first ever podcast advertisement. I think we have 13 shows that are running a Podmatch ad just to test it. We tried Google ads at one point. We tried some social media stuff. And the reality is, not that I'm not dogging it. That can be for some people. We've just done a really good job growing organically, and it maybe even like a slightly slower but yet very consistent pace. And the type of people that show up organically are typically friends of people like Nicholas, right? Like you. And your friends are like you, and we like you. So we probably like your friends as well. And reality is, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, we just found that when we started running a lot of these ads and stuff, we got people with very different mindsets and different culture that didn't really fit the vibe we were going for. And to tie this back to the original story real quick about how we grew really fast, yes, I credit chance, or in my case, I actually credit God. Like, that's where that came from. So that's where I credit that. But it's what you do with that matters. Sure, the timing is right, and you talk about all these different factors. From the day these people joined, I started making connection with them, talking to them. What can we do better? How can we improve? And there's something that actually, someone on your show, was an episode I listened to earlier. It was with Mark Hirschberg. And for anyone interested, I encourage you to go back and listen to this episode. It was on 10/25/2023. And he was talking about, what he said is, like, when you put in effort, you put in more effort than others, you're going to excel beyond the rest. And for me, I knew that was going to separate us. There's going to be other services like us. Yes, what was going to separate us was me going in organically and doing things that don't scale, for lack of a better term, and diving into that relationship. And so since that day, yes, we've tried a few little ads here and there. Like I said, we're trying podcast ads right now, but the reality is we can contribute the mass majority of our growth to just what we do naturally and organically of building community and actually serving these people, doing what others won't, right? And often doing things that don't scale.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the Mark Hirschberg example. Number one, that episode is worth cash money to anyone who listens to it.
100%. It's super good. By the way, I like rewound it. What year is this? I started it over. So.
Yeah. Well, one of my students listened to it. Well, I don't know if she listened to it, but she might have. But she used some of the negotiation techniques in terms of just getting that 10% pay bump, 1% or 5% pay bump in the beginning of your career, and at the end of your career, that's a multiplier. Just little basic things like that. And you're talking about worth $100,000 speaking. What a great guy! And what happened is that we started a business relationship there in terms of, he said, how can I help you? Because it was a good interview, who would you like to talk to? And I said the same thing in terms of, you got to speak to this guy. So I think what Podmatch has done is it's created a community, like you said, of like-minded people. And obviously you get the good ones and the bad ones. And as I've gone through the process with Podmatch, I've actually slowed down the number of interviews I'm doing because I've got to put in more quality. I've got to do a bit more vetting. So you've got to still do a bit of work for yourself. But yeah, that community building, that sharing information between each other, because because we're not paid to do the interviews. I mean, we get our little commissions, thank you, but we're not doing it for the money necessarily.
Right.
It's just such a great platform, and the kind of folks I've met, I would never have been able to meet necessarily this many and this quality in my day-to-day life. So that's been super exciting. So community building, and I want to talk about that. You have been in the podcast education space for quite a while. As you know, I'm also a digital marketing lecturer in Norway. There's a company I really admire which is called HubSpot, and one of the major drivers of HubSpot is not their Google ads, but it's their articles, it's their training, it's their giving best practice. And talk to me about how you are helping grow the quality of podcasters through your platforms, because I think Pod Pro is the platform that you use for that. Yeah,
we're actually moving it all into Podmatch.
Okay.
So actually, today, if you look at it, it's all inside of Podmatch.
I
There's no way you would have known.
There were two names, and I was like, I was just on Pod Pro.
It's all inside of Podmatch. So we're moving. Our blog used to be on WordPress, and that's why we did it when we first started. We had trouble. Podmatch is completely a custom software build, right? So I was like, we just need something else. We can't name the same thing. The things you learn in startup life, right? And that's like one of my lessons learned. But everything as of today, funny, there's no way you would have known that, is all officially inside of Podmatch now. So, but to answer your question here, I realized there was a need for this because as soon as we launched Podmatch, again, me being heads down in the community, right? So I have my co-founder who's a software developer, my wife who's my other co-founder who's more of like a COO type of role. She's great at operations, keeping things running. My job was front facing, talking to people. Hey, Nicholas, what do you like? What do you hate? Like, what is it that we can do better, right? And I started realizing a problem, and it's that podcast hosts were leaving. And I told my co-founder, Jesse, I was like, hey, man, I got to start getting on some calls. So we added an email to it saying, hey, will you give us 5 minutes on a call to tell us why you're leaving? And most of them wouldn't get on a call, but they'd respond saying, I'm not leaving Podmatch. I'm quitting my podcast completely. And not exaggerating, that was about 99% of the time. Like out of 100 people, only one was like, this sucks. I'm not going to be here, right? And of course, nothing's for everybody. So I respect that. There was not a lot of constructive criticism, right? But the other 99, they're just quitting. I'm like, there's no way. These people are just saying that. And we started diving into the data, and the reality is that is the truth of it, is that people just don't make it in podcasting. And as soon as we saw that, I was like, man, we've got to do some educating. Not that it's our job to make them continue to podcast, but if they're quitting for any reason other than the fact that they just don't want to do it, because if there's friction, can we help remove that friction? And from that day forward, I really committed to helping people avoid what's called pod fade in the biz, right? Which just means you stop your podcast prematurely to the end of the run that you wanted to do on it. And so for me, everything is around that. And so I started diving even deeper into individual conversation. Okay, what made you quit? Why? Right? So I started getting these conversations, and that's what made me dive into the actual the actual education side of it. And the reality is, you mentioned HubSpot's blog. I followed their lead. Almost, that's been my favorite blog since I was doing WordPress stuff like 15 years ago or whatever it was, right? Is just their transparency, the way that they serve. I saw them model that, and I was like, man, let's make it like that, where everything we have is just here. If this will help you stay in it, and how else can we help? Tell us what else that you're needing. And so for me, that's a really big point of how we bring people to Podmatch, is it's just educational. And a lot of times it's not me sharing it. It's someone saying, I'm having trouble with the automations of my podcast. And we have content on that. It's like, people are like, here you go, check it out. And they're like, oh, what's this Podmatch thing that's on, right? And so I have put a big emphasis on really just transparently helping, serving as much as I possibly can.
With founders being so involved in their business like you are, you've got a couple of advantages in terms of, I mean, for me as a podcast host, have the founder of a company I admire on my show is something really cool. But not many people have done this. I've reached out to the CEO of HubSpot. He hasn't come back to me yet, but I will get him. I will get him on the show. But you are very personal in terms of your marketing. So you send the emails it comes from your address with your name. It says, I want to talk to you, and you do respond. How much longer can you do that authentically?
Yeah, and so for me, that's the most important thing that I do. And I do not have any virtual assistants. I don't have any executive assistants. I'm not against those things. It's just not what I wanted to do. This all goes back to an early conversation I heard between an interviewer whose name is escaping me right now, and the person who started a little company that we know as Uber, right? I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it, but Uber's pretty big in most places, right? And the conversation was around the lines of like, how have you been able to build this business? And Airbnb's founder said almost exactly the same thing. So I listened to both these guys. So Airbnb's founder, a couple years later, I heard him saying the same stuff. I don't know if they're like in the same circle, or if this is the same person. I don't know, right? But regardless, what I really heard them saying was, hey, we're doing things that don't scale. I guess a more tangible example would be the latter, right? The Airbnb. They would go to the houses, take the pictures for people, and ask them if they have any questions. That doesn't scale. That founder is still not doing that. But his whole thing is, he said his success was due to the fact that he was willing to do that at the start. And so we made that our start. And about a year and a half in, I hit the point where I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, well, I have to start backing up. And so we took all the necessary steps. I hired virtual assistants. I hired executive assistants. There was actually no way to communicate with me anymore. Like directly, it was gone. And I did that for about 6 months. But then I ended up at a podcasting conference. And somebody walked up to me and said, Alex, man, I'm such a huge fan. Like, thank you for like just being so hands-on, for helping, for serving. I didn't know who this guy was. I took a picture with him. Come to find out, he was the #1 person on Podmatch for like a long time. Well, I say #1 person, like he used it more than anybody else. He's shared it more than anybody else, all that. I didn't know who he was. And I was at this conference feeling a little like depressed the whole time, even though there's tons of people here I'm getting to meet and stuff. But I went home saying, I don't like this. This is not the business I want to build. This isn't fun for me. It feels inauthentic, and I don't want to do it. And again, for other people, your convictions are different. I'm not saying you're wrong if you decide to go that model. I didn't want to. So what I decided to do, and this is kind of full circle here to your question, is what I decided to do is say, okay, how can we automate the things that most people won't automate so that I can work on the things that don't scale? And so the way we've built this business is there's very few big picture tasks that we haven't automated. I mean, even things like our roadmap, which sounds crazy and it took a little bit more work. But as far as like being the visionary, most of that stuff has been completely automated using different tools and ideas and strategic days where I'll map out the next 12 months and then I'll touch it, right? So that I can be more involved in the individual lives of the people that are using our software, that are in our community. So I've flipped that on its head, which maybe there's going to be an end to it, but right now I'm nowhere near my capacity. My time, I have plenty of it available within the working hours I've allotted. So I'm not
Obviously,
working 12, 15-hour days.
Speaking to me, so
right, yeah. So because I'm very strict about when I end work and stuff like that. So I'm not saying I'm going to do this 24/7, but the reality is I still have plenty of time throughout the day for this to scale. And we think that the market cap is about 3x our current size for us. And so we just have built systems around the fact that can Alex still do this at 3x? I will need a little bit of help, but it is possible for me to do without being stressed or overloaded while still delivering the same product to people. And that's a very long answer. I'm sorry, Nicholas.
Yeah, no, but and some really good points there. I think that being able to see that you not made a mistake, but that the your approach doesn't tie in with your philosophy is a very good one that you could go back to that. And I think again the real engagement with your followers just means the quality of people are going to probably stay with you a bit longer. I mean, this has given you an extra year's fees from me at least, because of but simple things like that. And I think entrepreneurs need to understand that as you said, you can't automate everything. Don't use all of these fancy tools just to let other people do it. Get to know your audience, get to know your customer, get to know what the pain points are. And that's what the big boys, Unilever, Coca-Cola, and that do every day. They understand who their customer is, and they are passionate, or not passionate, fanatical about understanding how they can keep you as a customer by giving you a good product and service. I wanted to talk a little bit about how you keep your energy up. You mentioned that you're a God-fearing man and that you manage your time properly. This is a growing business, 3x, growing, etc. How are you managing burnout? Are you in the excitement phase of your business? Where are you, and how are you managing it as an entrepreneur?
I'd say that changes day to day, the phase that I'm in. I'm a pretty passionate and maybe overly ambitious and overly excited type of founder, if you will, right? Or entrepreneur in general. I'd say that's kind of like my normal pace. But some days, I'm just not feeling it, if I can be real. But I do understand the fact that you have to bank. You can't bank on the days where you're excited, where you're energized, right? You have to plan for the days where you're not. And so for me, I've built my entire lifestyle around those days, which happen to be few and far between, which maybe is because of the systems I have in place. And people all the time tell me, Alex, you're too analytical, you're too extreme on this stuff. I'll happily share it. I'm not saying that everyone needs to do this to succeed. I have friends that do the exact opposite, and they do really well. But for me, I just know that if I'm going to do this for a long period of time, and that's the plan, we have no plans to exit or sell or anything like that. Like, this is going to be foreseeable future. I need to build some systems around that. So, Nicholas, if it's helpful, I'll just go into my day. Maybe that'd be the best way to do it. So I wake up 2 hours before I start work. That's when my alarm goes off. And I work from home. So no office or anything like that. Like, I have a home office, that's it. But the first 2 hours of my day are spent doing my morning routine. So I do some breathing. I like to do that. I do a little bit of light exercise. Not so much that I need a shower, right? Just to get the blood flowing a little bit. As a follower of Jesus, I spend time in the Bible and in prayer and worship, a little bit of reflecting and things like that. Do some grounding activities. Just some things to kind of get me my mind fresh. And I don't think about work during that time. I don't use my phone. I don't use my computer. The only thing I'll grab is a pen and paper, because I also spend a little bit of time doing some creative stuff. So I'll just kind of plan creative things. It's not for the business. It's typically like, how could you make a better dishwasher, right? Can you make one that unloads itself? And silly things, but the reality is that sparks creativity, which makes me a better creator. And so I'm always just doing those type of things. And every morning, that first 2 hours is very, very important to me. And then from then, 8 a.m. now, so 6 a.m. is when I wake up, 8 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. is technically my work time. I do something a little bit weird in between this time, though. I work out while I'm working. So I have, you can't see it in the shot, but just 5 feet away from me, there's all of my workout gear. Kettlebells, push-up stuff, pull-up stuff, all kinds of bands. The stuff I like to do to work out. And I do some activities beyond that, but I find I'm really fresh when I finish something. If I just take 10 minutes and bust it out a little bit and then come back to work, I'm fresher when I'm shifting gears. And so, 8 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. might sound like a long shift, but the reality is I'm taking breaks in between it. I also make sure that I'm really focused on work during that time. So it's not like, I'm going to take a little bit of time and go do this, right? No, I'm very focused. And to make sure I stick to this schedule, my wife has my screen time password on my computer, which means I don't have access to my computer before 8 a.m. and after 5:30 p.m. It automatically shuts down. And I can't do anything about it because I don't know the password. Now, I could technically go ask her, but we've built those kind of that understanding that I'm not going to do that, and she's not going to just put in the password because I want to work more. So I know that, hey, as an entrepreneur who likes to work, I have to have an end if I'm going to avoid burnout at some point. And so that's kind of the flow of my day. And then in the evening, always try to do something fun. I'm very big about having meaningful experiences with the friends in my life. We don't sit around and talk about work. We go do something fun. We live close to the ocean in Jacksonville, Florida, USA, and I like to go ride bikes. We have beach cruisers, so we go ride bikes with friends, and we go to different things happening in the city. And then I'm very strict about going to bed on time. I go to bed at 10 p.m. Starting at 9 p.m. till 10 p.m. is kind of like my wind down time, if you will. I'm turning off screens, all that stuff. And that is my entire day. And I take one full day off per week. So for Friday evening until Sunday morning is kind of how I do this. My computer doesn't turn on. I don't even use my phone. My phone's in a closet. I don't own a TV, so I'm not watching TV or anything like that. And that's my tech detox / work detox. And I always tell myself I'm fasting, worry, and want during that time. I'm not worried about anything with the business or personally, and I'm not wanting for things. I'm not like, I want a bigger house or I want this, right? I don't let those mindsets come up, and I find that refreshing starts me fresh the next coming week. So that's how I run my life.
So there you have it, folks. That is the recipe for success. The book's coming out soon. Read that, and you'll be successful as well.
I don't know,
but I that concept of a little bit less screen time. I teach digital marketing, so I'm constantly having to learn new technologies beyond TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of these platforms, and it's getting a bit tiresome. It's getting to a stage where how much more entertainment, how much more can my brain actually suck and absorb in? And with AI coming in as well, just more, and we were talking about Udio.com to create music. There's just so much stuff, and I think we might have something similar to what happened with the arts and crafts movement after the Industrial Revolution, where people didn't want lots of mass-produced things that were beautifully made. They wanted handmade, organic things that were made in a village or looked like they were made in a village. I think we're going to have more and more of these digital detoxes, and perhaps the younger folks are the ones who are going to do it as well, because they've grown up with iPads in their hand. Maybe at some stage it is going to go, I'm done. And then this whole industry in terms of screens and that will change. So anyway, that's a side point. One last thing I wanted to chat to you about is some, not competitors, but folks that you admire in the industry. I'm going to give you one or two, and then we can just chat about them quickly. So one of them is a company called Descript. Now, Descript is what I use for all of my podcast editing. And it's basically just the best platform. I use Riverside to record all of these, but I bought a year's contract for Riverside, so I'm stuck on them, and they keep adding interesting and nice new features the whole time. So I'm like, yeah, okay, keep using it. And Descript is probably one of the best tech marketing companies I've come across, because every time I think, okay, I'm going to Riverside has come up with something that solved a problem for me. Descript comes up with something even better that is more useful. So I was on a call with them yesterday. They had a launch of their season 6. You've got to watch the video. It is magnificent. I'm going to send you the link. It's 12 minutes, but you have to watch it. It's just genius. And they are constantly listening to customers. I put in some requests, and those requests are now built into the new product. So, but it's such a tough space because technology is moving, AI is moving, and as a business, keeping up to date with all of these changes and all new competitors trying to eat your lunch is quite tough. So I'd recommend you check out the marketing that Descript do to keep customers, because every month I want to change, and then they bring in something I'm like, damn it, this is so good, I can't leave. What companies out there do you admire in terms of building customer loyalty other than the HubSpots?
Yeah, real quick, Descript. I just want to say this because tech stuff is always cool to me. Canva, I don't know if you ever used Canva.
Yeah.
Canva was like something that just blew my mind. I still look at it and the team uses it. I'm like, someone built this. Like, this is unreal. I feel the same way about Descript. The first time I saw Descript, I'm like, I'm impressed. And like that for me is just rare. And I'm not trying to be rude, but like I've kind of, after a while, and you more so than me, you've seen it before, typically, right? And I felt like Descript did some things where I'm like, whoa, like this, they created this, right? So that is a company that I admire, and I actually on their Squadcast side, so they're alternative to Riverside. I know Rock, Ariel, and Zach, the people that really kind of brought it. They were independent first, and they brought it into the company. So they've done a very good job listening to people. And I always admire that. Like, who's listening to people? Another company I admire, and let me think if I can keep it in podcasting. One is Buzzsprout. They're a hosting platform. So if you have a podcast, you would host it with them, and then they would syndicate it to Apple, Amazon, Spotify, all the places on your behalf, right? So you kind of have your hub. They've done a very good job with their customer support. And we've modeled off of that. Actually, their head support person, her name's Priscilla. Every quarter, or every other quarter, I don't know what it is at this point, I take her out for coffee. I just want to learn from her. She's done such a good job building a team and a culture that really serves the people that are using their product. it's rare for anyone to ever say anything bad about them, even if they don't like the product, because it's like, man, they do such a good job serving us. And Alicia and I, so she runs our community support, our member support within Podmatch, and she's just done a phenomenal job really modeling it that way and done a really good job. And so that has been super inspiring and motivating to us. So that's a company that I really I've grown to love. I think that they've just done a really good job from that regard. There's so many others. Do you want me to keep it in podcasting, or is that good?
That's good. I think
cool. Okay.
It's and you bring a good point there in terms of customer service. Riverside, any problems I have, if I've messed up on my side, they say, well, here's the problem, here's how to solve it, and they are very quick. And it's the personal, interaction. It's not AI, it's not bots, it's real people talking to you. And I think that's what's separating certain companies that are just using AI, let's use this for everything. You'll leave after a month if your problem isn't solved. So I think keeping that, one of the ways that smaller businesses or startup businesses can succeed as well is keeping that personal touch. Yeah, I mean, we could keep jabbering for ages. I'm actually going to talk to Ariel from Descript because I was on the call yesterday. I just loved what they were doing, so I wanted to talk to them on a similar kind of discussion we're having. So hopefully I'll have Descript on a call soon. But Alex, please keep up the good work. You've transformed my life basically with Podmatch because it made it so easy. My last point is, and it's a sales point for Podmatch. Filtering out the trash. I've had a whole bunch since I've joined Podmatch, I've had about 50 other people say, hey, we've got a list of podcasts, we've got this, come and join our platform. And I got a list of, I put in my details and I got a list of people that wanted to speak to me. There was no process, no details. I couldn't put in my calendar. And the quality of the guys, half of them didn't pitch up to the shows. And one of the things in Podmatch is you can see how, ratings of folks. So it's such a great platform. I'm not going anywhere. Anyone who is considering being a host or a podcaster, try it out. It gives you the runway basically of how you should do it, the ABCs and tips and tricks, and there's a community if you're in something special, and you can build relationships with fantastic people. So honestly, I would love to do podcasting full time, so that'll be my longer term aim. And I just love what you've done. So thank you for joining me today. And anyone else who wants to get in a podcast, it's joinpodmatch.com/Nick Kuhne, NickKuhne. And that will get you a great sample of Podmatch and see what you're missing out.
Yeah, and that's where I tell people to go. Like, if you were looking for more about me, everything we do is on Podmatch. Go to Nicholas's link that he just shared. It's also going to be in the description. And any way you reach out, you just heard the conversation, you're probably going to get me. And if it's a really busy day, you'll get Alicia, who is my wife/business partner. So, but I definitely look forward to connecting with anyone in the podcasting space, whether guest or host. But Nicholas, man, you're doing a great job with this. I do not doubt that podcasting full-time is in your future. You've literally got what it takes, and just an honor to be here today, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Now, before we wrap up, don't forget to show some love for From Startup to Wunderbrand by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. If you'd like to help us grow, tell your friends, share on social media, and leave us a review. For those of you who want to dive a little bit deeper into the topic, join me on Twitter @Nick Kuhne. Let's connect and chat about all things branding and digital. Until next time,